by Eleanor's live from the 83C3. All talks at the Congress are live translated between English and German and to one additional language, now French. We appreciate your feedback. Please use the hashtag C3Lingo. Your translator for this talk are Sherry and Snakey. Enjoy.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very happy that I'm allowed to be here, that you are here, and that we have some time for philosophy and legality and zeros and ones. And it's going to get very, very back to the basic principles. Yeah, we live in times we see as crisis. Everybody's talking about multiple crises. They're stacking up. And I don't have to tell you, you know this. You know them. It's looking like our world order is going to get changed in these transformative times. People are starting to think about the meaning of life and are looking for orientation and ideologies that offer such an orientation. This is a phenomenon of crises, so they're very en vogue right now. So we should deal with these, with worldviews and ideologies, to understand how this works. And it's very important to understand, and this is what my talk is about, what does a bright, wide ideology do to our thinking? What does this do to our way of thinking? We're not immune to this. There's a nice quote from Terry Eagleton: "As with bad breath, ideology is always what the other person has." And it's the other person, not yourself. But that's not quite correct. The idea is to not look into abyss of other people's ideologies, to mock them, to be scared of it. If you want to do that, turn to YouTube. But we're trying to do a personal self-check for your way of thinking here. Not because it feels good to do some navel-gazing, but because I think it's a security risk, actually, if we don't do it. Because right now, in these authoritarian tides we're confronted with, we need stable networks that are able to act. We need groups that are resilient and are able to form alliances, and actors who do networking, people who can work together. It's very important, because if you work together, it's not despite differences, but because you're different. So, thank you. So now it's about improving and securing your own networks, not just because we're trying to protect ourselves from the others with the bad breath, from the external actors, but we need to protect our own thinking from the temptations of calcification. I always say we and us. I'm going to leave it this vague. You can interpret it as you want. This community, yourselves, the liberal parts of society. You can just put in anybody you want. And all of these ideological hardenings in your thinking, we see them in this badly held debates we're confronted with. They're very morally charged. You know, just from a couple keywords: cancel culture, identity politics, pyrotechnic, prohibitions, hating laws. Or as you saw it recently at Ricardo's talk at Day One in Gaza, the comments were vile. It was very morally charged. It was kind of perverted, actually. These debates are marked by really targeted misunderstanding and distrust, and building of camps, and a rhetoric of individual shame. So we're always blaming everybody else and each other. And being ideological or being moral is already a morally charged thing, and accusations that are leveled at each other. You accuse each other to have positions not for moral reasons, but to look good yourselves. moral for moral's sake, just to put yourself in a good light. Philosophers call it a moral spectacle. You may know the term virtual signaling. And sometimes that's right, but sometimes it's not right. And until you find out, until you've talked, it takes a while. Maybe you come to a conclusion, but you've talked a lot and you haven't come to any useful action, haven't made any progress in any sense. There's no real material change. And it's debates that don't bring forth any new ideas.
So working and bring forward collective perspectives of action. And that is what is so important, especially now. And I'm not making any promises that, but rather an offer. I don't know if this way is so fruitful. I'm very, very blank on that. But I'm motivated. I feel a bit naked about this, maybe a bit headstrong, but still I'm very, very grateful that you're listening to me and following my attempt. And maybe you'd come out a bit more inspired. I'm very much aware about the problems that such amoral parts always come along very, very morally, and this can happen here as well. So this is an offer of a security update for their own way of thinking and a small collective self-revelation in 3 parts. So, Part 1, ground control and normative infrastructure. We are here as animals on a small blue and green planet, which is racing through the universe, and that is, as Nietzsche said, far from good and evil. We are here as a species human who learn to pose questions through the evolution and to tell stories and to find answers to our questions. So we are looking for these answers. And this deep human yearning for orientation and guidance in this great and super complex chaos, that is what you have to recognize, and recognize without any shame. I have to say this because this, for humans and communities, the self-reliance and the independence, this durability and orientation is very much connected to shame. And it's very much okay to look for durability and whole. And this providing of orientation, when things get sticky, it's something that's also already provided by religions. I mean, religion comes from religare, which means to tie, to connect, to fix. So it's the same thing as a railing, as a lifeline. This function also has a spiritual connection, localization, has been used by many spiritual organizations, like many religions used, and how many religions are working through the structures. And now in 2024, and oh look how nice I drew this. And in 2024 we have a choice of very, very diverse points of view and ideologies. Some are very old, some are new, some have a stable base, are very fundamentalistic, some have a lot of unchangeable dogmas and final orientations, guidelines. Some have a bit more leeway, and sometimes very much a coincidence where we are oriented towards, depending on where we were born, what influences we had growing up. So it's a lot of coincidence and what material conditions we had, etc. Of course, it can also have been a decision, a development, for example, through education, which induced new orientations and reorientations throughout your life, and trying to get new access to new points of views and creating new ways of thinking. And this process can be very, very creative and very fluid, as we've seen with the assassin of Magdeburg, which could call a buffet-type extremism, where people build up their own ideology, so it doesn't look very consistent from the outside. So in the UK, there's a special casing for this called mixed, unstable, unclear, where you're not sure where to position them on the right or left spectrum of political violence. So we will reconnect to this definition of political violence because our society is very, very individualistic. So this collective principles don't really connect to the people anymore. And we are confronted with a very, very diverse mix of different things. So first of all, we have to understand, without putting any value to this, that diverse constructs, and these constructs have an important function. And especially during crisis, we talk a lot about resilience, and a lot of studies talking about this, or explanations, tales, that people with a stable construct are more likely to pass through crisis well. Also, we have to recognize that it's very, very likely that we're all wrong. There's a famous scene where Richard Dawkins, an evolutionist biologist, is being asked, what if he's wrong? And he answers, anybody could be wrong. We all could be wrong. So we just have to understand and acknowledge that we could all be wrong. So now that it's clear that there's these constructs, we all have them, and they could all be wrong. And when this railing of guidance turns into a wall and this construction of thought turns into a prison, then we can talk about ideology. I will skip an intensive history of the terminology about how people have understood ideology in a different way. You could just read the Wikipedia article, and I would make a more pragmatic definition. Ideologies are a way of thinking which determine that for all social problems there is only one correct solution, that is the one true dogma. It's a way of thinking that tries to move the high complexity of the world and the chaos into the binary logic of good and bad. And the problem is that these logic works super well as a story, as a fight of good against evil, which we can see in many cases, for example, in Maloney's White Ring War of Cultures, building on Lord of the Rings, fighting the fight of good versus evil. And you really have a structural deficit if you don't do this. So far, I was unable, but I think there was this call for stories. I think that's available this time again. So how can you tell stories that are good, that are retold, which do not follow this thinking of good and bad? And another example, once I read the letters of Holger Mainz, who wrote them from prison, to his friends of the RAF, the Rote Armee-Fraktion, a left-wing terrorist organization in Germany, and he wrote, "You are either human or pig, there's nothing between. There's either victory or death, there's nothing in between." And he consequently also died due to his hunger strike in prison. It's very interesting to look at this. And normative infrastructures are set up in histories and images, which I'm also trying to do here by telling stories I just told you. But you have to zoom in far enough to see the definitions of relations and the rules. So what do we want to hold on to? So which rules do we want to adhere to? So it's all about orders. So before going on the next step, and thinking of what is being ordered and put into sections. So now I'll do a small break for some minutes. And you can consider, you can also chat with your neighbor. What provides orientation for me and what rules do I adhere to?
So. All right. You can, of course, consider these questions further. You can take them home with you. We're going to continue on to part 2 in my talk here. Illegal constructions, or the destruction of the one. It's a bit of a wild title, isn't it? What is this about? Yeah, I just said normative infrastructures do have the function of order, but what do they order? And if we go to a very, very abstract, basic level, any worldview organizes the relations of unity, plurality, and infinity. It's very abstract, but this relational location is the DNA of any worldview. You can imagine it like a card game. You want to play cards. You decide which card has which value depending on the game. One is a trump, diamonds, spades. Trump comes from triumph. Who triumphs over whom? So diamonds over spades, king, ace. You set a logic for the game, and that's the same for the normative basic configuration of infrastructure. You decide on a hierarchy. What's the strongest principle? Is eventually everything one, and one covers any differences, or is infinity the stronger principle, or alterity? And it sounds very, very abstract and ivory tower. What we see in the front end, this configuration, is the questions: do we as a community go for unity or diversity or inclusion, accessibility? These questions are very present in political debate right now. Identity politics and questions of inclusion, diversity, that's questions connected to this principle. It sounds very, very abstract, but it also has a material impact on our daily lives. And we come to a point that is very, very important to me, because I eventually noticed that my space is very, very abstract. And it's a bit misleading, isn't it? Because it's not about constructs and ideas floating about in space, and we in our daily lives translate them into practice. We execute these rules. No, it's not like that. It's a reciprocal thing. A worldview is always manual labor. Maybe my slides should look a bit like this. Yeah, I'll put it away. No, I'll keep it up for a hot second. So we produce and reproduce these ideas in our daily lives, in the way we organize each other, in the way we have relationships, in which relationships we have with our body, with technology. These are all very basic and very practical concerns, where we negotiate which societal game we play. Like we played 0 or 1 yesterday, the game, if you've been to that. Maybe that was just funny to me. Anyway, let's move on. But I thought, yeah, makes sense. It's a nice thing. Yeah, so we are still concerned with these illegal constructions. And in my opinion, there's good reasons which games we play. And so there's very, very good reasons not to play the game of the one. So why? Fascistic ideologies are ideologies whose trump is one. These are ways of thinking that are really focused on the one. One people, one Reich, one Führer, and it's always about this one. That obviously, logically, needs to be a defense against anything, against any opening, and broadening of horizons. And this, of course, has the consequences of the principle turning on itself, because the one is a fixed thing. There can't be any development ever. It's not in its nature. And this closing down makes development, makes life impossible. Freedom is taken away. It's important to say that it's not just about the Nazis. No. But a fascistic way of thinking can destroy any idea, no matter how good. You can turn it to totalitarianism. It's a question of methods, so of how you think. It works better for others, less good for others. But yeah, a lot of things, communism, can distort it beyond reason with a totalitarian approach. Yeah, this is where we really need to be careful and pay attention. But here in this room, we know everything is one except zero. And there's a lot of content in this sentence. There's nothing less than the destruction of the one. And one of philosophers working on this project who kind of held a strong argument against the one is Alain Badiou. He's a French philosopher. And he's building his thinking not quite on this way of thinking, but the basis of his thinking is the except one, the logic of our world of coexisting. And it's not a bad thing, actually. It's necessary. You see it here in these rooms. It's about chaos, originally. But there's also a lot of regulation here. There are many rules, especially here in Hall 1. And yeah, there's the one, but also there's the zero. And the zero is the one that supersedes these rules. And so these rules become a tear, it tears open. And this is how the openness gets in. It makes things possible. And it's not a revolution. It's maybe a revolution. It may be a new scientific theory. It may be new art, a new relationship in your personal lives. There's a border that's being crossed. An order is being toppled. So it's, by definition, an illegal incident. It's not illegal in the legal sense, but more in this logic of the world, to our ordered way of thinking. Illegality, crossing of lines, makes possible new things and forces us to have a reaction. There's this rift, and you can say, no, there's no rift. But this is already a reaction. Or I can fight the rift, can try to close it back up again. This is the reactionary reaction. Or I can say, okay, there's a rift, there's an opening, there's new possibilities beyond that maybe. And this is what this is about here, to make it a bit more practical. Yeah, it's all super abstract, but I try to sprinkle in these concrete examples. The established order said there's masters and there's slaves. This is a law of nature. But there's a slave revolution in 1796 in what today is Haiti. They said, no, slavery is not natural. There was a revolution, an uprising. And this is something, this was said in this very specific situation, hundreds of years ago, hundreds of kilometers away. But it's a statement that I, as a modern person in 2024, I, as a white European woman, can relate to, and I can try to update this in my personal context. I try to manage this like a set of dominoes, like a row of dominoes. First stone topples, and people don't directly relate to Haiti, but they relate to such a statement. These elements and they become elements of one movement. So you can say these statements are universal ones. So slavery is not natural is a universal statement applying to all of us. I'm trying to build a starting ramp. It's leading somewhere, I promise. So as a human, I'm not a subject, but at first I'm an individual with my own personal existence. But you says, if I work for this illegal opening in the system, and if I embody in this, and if I carry it further, if I carry this impulse like the domino stone, I become part of a superordinate subject. And so this subject is a superordinated construct that makes me, because I'm above this system, it takes me out of my individual morasses. I remove myself from that. So this doesn't mean that my individual self doesn't exist, doesn't mean it's worse or something. The world isn't bad. The one isn't bad, but there's something that's important. It's like a Copernican turn. I'm not the center of things anymore. Yeah, I'm here, I'm important and everything, but I'm not the center of the universe anymore. And this removal and spreading beyond individual borders, that's what it's about. And the consequence of this is that you do things that are against your individual interests. So there's many examples that people go to prison for their ideals or expose themselves to risks. We talk a lot about this here. Or get up at 3 in the morning to protest against the German far-right party AfD. You accept these personal sacrifices not because of duty or to be morally superior, but because you gain something through this. You become part of a more universal process that makes life possible and that makes you feel real alive, said Hume. And yeah, maybe there's something about this. We're going to have another short break where you can wonder what makes you act beyond your own self-interests.
Okay, I know this is very short, but please take this question on. I already see cards showing the time. We're going on to part 3, and you can discuss this later on. Okay. So I'm convinced that we need to include some love and personal opinion in infrastructure projects, in our personal infrastructure. Maybe also start a new infrastructure project. I'd be part of that. I'm not sure how to do it, but if you've got any ideas, please reach out to me. But right now, as a first step, I have been inspired by this emergency response algorithm. I don't know if you know this, but those are algorithms which are a list of how to react in an emergency situation if you're in a situation of acute stress and to risk sources of mistakes. So, what's my mission, what to do? And they've got acronyms. And in Okay, that's cool. And I'll try this for discursive emergencies and ideological turbulences. And if nothing works, let's go. We're gonna need some steel, which is going to be the English translation we'll be working with here. And let's go through this. So, first, stable position. That's always good. So if you don't know where's top and bottom, or if you're too sure on your moral high ground, then it's very good to leave your moral high ground and to take your moral compass and to twist it into the horizontal zone and to look at it more distant. And then suddenly you can see there's so many perspectives, points of view, as there are people, and all the people have their reasons to believe certain things and to think certain things, and almost all people think that they're the good kind. I think there's a good example, or a very nice scene, where you can see Mielke, part of the Staatssicherheit, which was the secret service of the GDR, who has to justify himself in front of the Volkskammer, which was the parliament of the GDR, and he said, but I love you, all the people. And you think, yeah, okay, he was really very convinced that he was acting for the GDR, so he's keeping up a restrictive regime out of love. So now you have to understand that structurally you would be in the same starting position with other people in their points of view.
Anybody could be wrong.
There are no differences in radical equality. Everybody could be wrong. Anybody could be wrong. So being more relaxed in your stance helps to not jump, to not take any rage bait thrown in front of you. But your position should be stable, that you can understand that all positions are equal, but you should not be indifferent about this, but understand why some points of view are actually more easy to realize than others. And T, the ideological Turing test, you might know this is a political Turing test or a method in mediation. It's about summing up the position of the political opponent correctly, so that a third person can't understand if it's the position of your own or of your opponent, adversary. That's a great method to overcome grotesque torn images and terminology. It's very good to overcome the assumption you would have, which are just simply not true. Then hacking either-or principles. So you have to, of course, there's decisions where you can only have a yes or no, but there are sufficient complex systems where you can't decide if it's a yes or no. So if you're put in front of a decision where there are only two options and you aren't happy with either, then you have to understand to do what's not possible in the form. Why not both? Why not something completely different? So if I would be asking here in the room, are you pro-Israel or pro-Palestine? Well, come on, position yourself. Then it's very easy to say, yeah, I've got my position, but you just can't reduce such a complex case to such a binary decision. So it's our task to use all our ability and creativity to find a third or fourth or fifth way of considering this question. So if you want to abolish binarities, that you just don't replace old binarities with new ones, because then this fucked up situation of a binary logic just repeats itself in a different view. The time is running. Oh goodness. Okay, I'm nearly done. And E, gauge the extent of the disagreement. And if you see, everything is so polarized, but it's not about different ideologies, but different differences in points of view. So, for example, we're playing a game of cards, and we've got different cards on our hand, and suddenly we notice that our opponent is playing with a different logic of game. Of course, you can't really tell this every case, but sometimes it's necessary to understand how deep the misunderstanding is, because if it's just some centimeters distance, then it's easier to overcome this instead of escalating, but rather creating trust and using constructive ways to overcome differences in points of view. And L, it's a bit
ein bisschen arg gedehnt mit dem L.
it's building landing bridges connecting to Hamburg and using the 84% rule. That rule basically says do not look for the 100% solutions, but rather look for some things that is a 48% solution, because they're less earnest, they're less serious, they're less radical about themselves, but they're useful intrusion to start working with other people. So it's easier to work with a more liberal CDU of the Conservative Party in Germany than working with a radical leftist. So you need tolerance for ambiguity.
In einer problematischen Welt gibt's
because in a problematic world, it's not that common to have unproblematic positions. And that's why you have to consider that for yourself. And we have questions and we forward, and for this forwarding we need some space. So whenever you're stuck somewhere, just grab steel. And this will immediately replace the Bible, hopefully. This is just an offer as a method for each situation. And in this sense, I wish you all a wonderful new and admirable year with collective actions, exiting your own zone of comfort and exiting individual interested and looking forward to objective gain. And thank you for listening.
Yep, thank you. We have 2 or 3 minutes for questions. Are there any questions from the audience? Yeah, I see microphone number 2. Yeah, hi. I have a comment to make. And it was a bit irritated that you only call an ideology what is a binary reductionist closed model of explaining the world. It seems a bit like binary reductionism. So it's either an ideology, and there's those who don't have an ideology. And I want to ask a question. Shouldn't it be more about to practice systems of ordering the world that don't totally give up the premise of explaining the word totally, but those that are open to change, that negotiate with other views of the world and don't work binarily, reductionist, but that are still, that could be still an ideology, couldn't it? And so the thing with the anybody could be wrong, it's also very right, wrong, very binary and reductionist. Isn't it more about, and shouldn't we more talk about after what parameters we use to gauge a right and wrong? Yeah, thank you. Sure, we should negotiate this. Negotiation is a good principle. Yeah, this is again the 84% principle. You say, okay, yeah, there's no really right and wrong things, but yeah, I could absolutely relate to you. That's right. You can totally consider this. Is this ideology definition that I've used, is this one that reduces this to a binary? I don't know. I don't really see the contradiction between what you said and between what I said, except that maybe you can say, yeah, I make a very, very strict difference between ideology and worldview, but maybe you can consider to think it's more a corridor and can develop this further. It's not a binary system. Yeah, it was a lot of waffling about it, but yeah, we should definitely think about this. Okay, it's spontaneous answers are not my sense. Yeah. Okay. So another question. Sorry to interrupt. Microphone 3, please. Yeah, maybe it's going in a similar direction. Actually, I was wondering if you need to move. There's a lot of ideology. So if I fight for such a rift, isn't it just a bit of laziness to retreat to an ideology? Doesn't this make sense? I have to negotiate my borders and boundaries somehow. And I don't want to work together with a right-wing politician, a conservative politician. And maybe having some dogmatism is a bit practical, so I don't have to think about it anytime. So I don't can quite get where you draw the line. And I think the criticism of ideology is important, but inimicity is maybe taking it a bit too far sometimes, because I'm more of a positivist here. We define ideology a bit differently, and so, yeah, I'm grateful, but I'm confused. Yeah, grateful but confused is a nice sentiment, yeah. Yeah, sure, you'd need to really, really stringently define ideologies. What is it? But we don't have the time for this, yeah. But yeah, I agree with you. Laziness and capacity. I don't have time to negotiate and think through everything and talk through everything. Yeah, that's logical. But yeah, that's why I am for this infrastructure project that we are trying to start here together. I'm not going to say let's found a church. Maybe we want to do it, but yeah, not everybody needs to do everything. But yeah, we as a society, we have a division of labor. We consider what is this, how do we communicate this without getting into a dogma by accident. But maybe we can have a playground of ideas without being enclosed and being locked in, and without having to resort to violence against others. So, thank you. And one last question. Can people find you somewhere specific for further questions? Yeah, actually. I can keep standing around here, but at 1700 you can come to the yodeling workshop. It sounds unrelated, but it's something that gives you structure. It's very physical activity. And it's a nice collective experience without having to be any kind of ideological. Thank you. Give her a round of applause. Thank you for being here. So, this was the English translation of An Immoral Offer.